Welcome back to the Blue Chip Academy podcast, empowering the next generation of leaders by equipping them with a detailed blueprint of success while using sports as our catalyst. Today, jumping into it, the Director of Alumni Relations with the Buffalo Bills, the Bills Mafia, my man, Jeremy Kelley. Welcome onto the show, man.
What's up, my guys? It's been a long time coming, man. I'm like, yo, when my man JK gonna come get me on the show, man? I ain't worthy.
Never that, man. We're on here, man. I appreciate you jumping on, man. Like we talked a little earlier, just having a very unique perspective, right? Playing in the NFL, having a unique journey to get to the NFL, coming from Maine, from West Seneca, New York, and now working back in your hometown with the Buffalo Bills, you guys are having a nice run right now. And dealing with a snowstorm, so prayers out to everybody in Buffalo dealing with that your way. But just overall, man, we like to hear like unique perspectives and give guidance on how to go through this process. And like I said, you're one of the people that have seen people coming through this process. So reverse engineer a little bit, kind of what you see from your perspective, from your experience, and kind of a little bit of things that we see in the NFL now. So just tell me a little about your background, man. Say you from West Seneca.
Well,
yeah.
Born and raised. Well, like you said, man, prayers up to the city of Buffalo right now. It's down bad. We have just experienced a blizzard of a century, and it's been a rough year, man. I mean, we had a massive storm a couple weeks back that came through here. Back in the springtime, we had the shootings that took place in Buffalo, and so it's been one thing after another. But if there's a resilient city that's been through it all, and included 4 Super Bowls, we gonna bounce back. We're gonna bounce back. But right now, jokes aside, it really is. It's going to be a tough couple of weeks for some folks that have, the death toll continues to go up. Snow ain't just something that looks pretty looking at it outside the window, man. When it comes in waves, as much as it did, it becomes a life-threatening situation. So thankful, family safe, everybody's been good here, but all is well. But like you said, man, born and raised, Buffalo, New York, West Seneca, which is a suburb right outside of Orchard Park, which is the home of the Bills. I grew up 12 minutes from the stadium. So for me, one thing I always talked about, traveling the country and this and that, but then coming back, I never took for granted living 10, 12 minutes from an NFL team. Like, when you think about it, some people have to drive 3-4 hours just to go to a game on Sunday, man. We had that thing. You pass the stadium going to a basketball practice, a football practice, you know what I'm saying? And I can remember vividly until 22, 23 years old, every time I drive past that stadium, get goosebumps thinking about playing there. I that was one thing like that drove me. But and I actually never did play in the stadium, honestly.
Oh wow!
And not in the pro. Now my first pro game actually was against the Bills, but it was in Indianapolis when I was with the Colts. But so that was kind of full circle in itself. But yeah, man. So this is home. Been in the role now this is season 6, so time flies, man. Time flies. But my journey, as many, and I think you can attest to it. It's never a straight line. But I couldn't be more thankful for the path that I was led on. That took me into 8-9 different cities around the country, and eventually right back here. At the beginning of my transition, the end of my career, playing experience is what I kind of refer to it as, to be right back in this position to help guys in the NFL translate, and transition into life after football. So it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing that I couldn't have wrote it out better than myself for that transition to happen the way it did for me.
Most definitely, because when we talk about just that ending and that just transition out of the game, you're in that position where it's extremely critical. It's pretty unsupported in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about it, but just there's a setup to make that transition a lot easier than sometimes some guys go through. But going back to, just the aspect that you touched on, growing up in Buffalo, it's a pretty interesting point that you made. We're just growing up in a football culture where your city has an NFL team. Like me growing up in Pittsburgh, like the Steelers were like, that's the culture of the city, whether you're growing up in football and it's like, this is the brand of football. You grow up watching the crazy defense, Kevin Green and, Bam Morris and Cordell Stewart or whatever just the identity of that town is and how it is. Like in Pittsburgh, it's a steel mill town. and play football, and that's kind of it. Whether it's people working in football or playing football, and like that is the culture. And there's a level of pride that you see from different cities, whether it's coming from recruiting. That you touched on something that is interesting. It's like that the places that are bred in football, there's a different level of culture from the players and attachment to it. So what age did you start playing football?
So from let's see, I started I think like 8 years old, maybe second, third grade. Second, third grade, I started playing. West Seneca Little Loop, shout out, and man, it was. I love the game, and it started there. It literally started there, and I ran into one of my coaches. I think it was last summer. Last summer, I ran into one of my little league coaches, and he kind of looked at me at the corner and said, I ain't seen this man in 20 years, right? Now, he was one of my favorite coaches first year of football. I run into him at, I take my mom for a milkshake or something. And he said, Jeremy Kelley? And I was like, Coach Burke, man. And I looked him dead in his eye, man, because it was a moment in time. He's an older gentleman and whatnot, but it was something that just was on my heart. And I said, thank you for making the game fun. I said, I ain't seen you in this long, but I'm telling you right now, it was coaches like yourself, coaches like Rob Wilson, coaches like the guys that were there when I first started playing that made me love it. It's the purest form of the game. There's no agenda, there's no politics. It's just, hey, let me come out and coach you what this game is about. Let me show you what this is. And so yeah, that's when it started, man.
No, you're touching on a real important part, even just from the standpoints I was going to ask. Did you enjoy football from day one? But you're saying that that was an experience where you started to love it and things of that nature. And I talk about it a lot, where our relationship, whether it's the black community, just athletes in general, getting into football, there's a level of entering it for a level of toughness, teamwork, camaraderie, discipline, and all these different things, because it's not always fun. Like for me, I didn't enjoy it the first couple of years. It was more based on the culture of the town, to be completely honest. Like it was like something that people do in Pittsburgh. We play football, and it's like that's our sport. Like if you're in New York, you play basketball, right? Like that. We play football in Pittsburgh. So that got me past the beginning. The first 2 years was like, all right, learn discipline, learn toughness, learn all those different things. But my relationship with those coaches, I guess at that point where it was just like a level of toughness and all that, it was a level of pushing me. So I don't really remember. But the one coach I had was like a coach, Keith, outside of my dad, where I got to like 7th, 8th grade, and it was like really teaching me the game, right? Like, okay, this is how we're going to prepare in the off season. And it was like learning the X and O's, learning stuff from off the field, bringing it on the field was that's when I think fell in love with it, but it was getting past like that toughness part. So it's like interesting to hear that like you just fell in love with it from the jump, right? Because your relationship with the coaches too, because I think that sometimes happens with our expectations of coaches when we get to college. When it's like, yo, he's not there to make it fun anymore. Like it like he's not there to be Uncle so-and-so. Like he's here to get a result out of you regardless of what. And I might leave. Even if I told you I would be here. Like, man. So we gonna get into that, but that's
we can get into that because I got my little story of that with college. Guys, you sign you up, pat you on the back, and then I say, Coach, where you going, man? Coach, where you?
No, so you had a healthy relationship with the game from jump.
Yeah, man, I really did. And I was that kid. I tell you, I mean, really, this is how I got into football, man. I had a best friend that lived down the street. He'd have to leave at 5:00 every day to go eat dinner before he went to practice. And I ain't had nobody else. I'm looking for someone to hang out with now. So I go to my mom one day. It's like, hey, can I play football? And she, true mother. Well, this and that. But she knew I grew up with an older brother, so roughhousing and being physical and all that stuff wasn't a thing. And then, sure enough, she signed me up. I'm out there. I got to practice late. These kids already in helmets and pads. We doing, neck bridges and stuff. I'm out there, no helmet, doing a neck bridge. Coach is like, no, wait you got to wait, young brother. Right? Like I was eager to play the game. And once I got the pads on, man, I'll never forget it. Mom lacing up my pads, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, right? This is what I'm going to be. And it was really from that moment. It sounds cliche, but that was it. That was it for me. My mom was fixated on that. So
it's not cliche because you're touching on something that people say it all the time. Like to play a game of football, you have to love it. If you don't love it, you won't make it. And I truly, truly believe that because there's a lot of benefits once you get to college, right? You got your scholarship, you get different notoriety, you get to NFL, there's all different types of benefits that come with playing in NFL. So like the love of the game, the guys that really, really love it, it permeates throughout your whole journey. Like the guys that really love it in college, they start to separate themselves. The guys that really, really love it in NFL start to separate themselves. And you find people that are just ultra, that's when you start realizing some people are just ultra talented and they don't have to care as much and they can still have the same outcome, right? Like that's what you learn going through like this whole ecosystem.
You learn that when you get to the pros, man, no doubt.
Man, you get like man, he ain't doing nothing that they told me to do. And he's like running faster, he's bigger, he's stronger. I'm like,
you the all pro with walk-on work ethic, like, yeah, you blessed, man. Like that is crazy, but it's really how it goes, And kudos, the cats that got that ability, man. I mean, this is a generation of talents. I wish I had it, but hey, we had to work for it, get it out the mud, man. So I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly.
No, 100%, and I would more so trying to point out the fact that, recognizing like, okay, I could do this and continue to enjoy it, but just the motivation that we see in different people when they're going through the game. Like just for myself as a recruiting coordinator, I could tell who loved the game because they were getting 1,000 likes on a picture, or they really loved it because they wanted to talk X and O's, or maybe they were just into it because their family was into it and like their older brother played and it was just like, oh, I can do this. Or some guy that was just like, I'm going to college. I'm using this to get to college. Like you can really start to understand like the personalities and how people approach the game. And I think, man, the NFL spends millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to try to figure that out about college players and how they're ticking. And it all starts from my experience or just from what I'm seeing going through the whole ecosystem of the conversation that we're having right now is that initial relationship with the game. Like what made you fall in love with it? Like so your identity with the coach, like, yo, thanks for making me fall in love with this. Like, man. And that's mine with my dad. Like he was my coach, and it was like, yo, like the things that I learned and the skills, the traits that I was able to take out, and the lessons that I learned from the game.
It's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. Now, we keep it real now for the kids that's out there, and anybody who watches this. Like, you go through those times like, man, I ain't trying to go to practice today, man. And you want to hang out with your friends, or you want to, you ain't trying to run laps or do leg lifts. Like, you go through those love-hate times. Right, I went through a time where I almost walked away from the game, man. My junior year, and I think it's important to tell because there's nothing easy about football.
Is this junior in high school or college?
This is junior in high school. There's nothing easy about football, and you're going to face adversity. And I think this is one of the transferable skills that you experience, as in a lot of things. But football is a game that is so demanding, both mentally and physically. And I think as you're finding out who you are as a player, who you are as an athlete, and especially at the high school stage, right? You could be switching positions. You're doing a lot of different things. It was my sophomore year playing JV. I was a quarterback at the time. I thought I was the next Mike Vick, bro. I was left-handed. I could throw the ball a mile on a rope. Couldn't take 2 steps to hand it off. Just still growing, goofy, right? Yeah. Bro, tripping over a blaze of grass, my guy. Big toe hurt on the right foot because I couldn't get new cleats because they was too small for the year before. Played the whole season with just a mess, right? But I was an athlete and I was one of the better athletes on the team, but I'm not playing. So I'm fed up, right? So we all, everybody that went through, maybe you didn't, but everybody, you go through a time in life where you're like, man, I'm gonna tell this coach, I'm him, I'm the guy. Yeah. And I sat outside his door waiting for him to get done with coaches meetings, and I was about to quit. And something came over me in that moment. It was like, if you quit now, what else are you going to quit in life? And I walked away, and I never did it again. I said that summer I committed and dedicated myself to training. My pop's a big trainer in the area. Any athletes, we talked about just any guys that came out of Buffalo essentially trained, from the Gronkowski brothers, Mike Williams, who was, NFL Rookie of the Year, NBA players, we all trained together, man. But again, to your point, I was a guy that was, I was half in, half out. I show up when I wanted to show up. And, that summer committed from that moment, because I knew hey, if I want this, if I really, really want this, if I want to be who I say I want to be, then I got to be all in. And the rest was history. And I ended up getting myself in a position to get recruited.
You made a profound statement, to be honest with you. That there's nothing easy about football. I think that's a pretty real statement, because there's some glitz and glamour that people see with like the building up to enjoy football, right? Whether you're physically ready, whether you're athletically there, the physicality of it, coaching. There's a level of brainwashing that has to operate in football. I'm not going to compare it to the Army, but there's a level of getting through stuff. You have to sacrifice, but there's a bond that happens when you're going through it. And you're touching on it, with just even like the guys that you train with, right? Coming up in Buffalo and things of that nature. You talk about quitting as a junior. Did you you're 6'6" now? So I'm like, how big were you as a junior in high school? Like, were you getting recruited yet?
So I'll take this. This was sophomore year. So I misspoke,
okay.
But this was sophomore year. And so it was the following year going into my junior year. That's when I was like, hey, I'm all in on this thing, right? So I'm sophomore year now. I finish the football season, and basketball starts. And as we started the basketball season, so I'll take you back to this. It's all part of the journey. So freshman year basketball, we go defeated, 0-20.
Oh no,
0-20. Taking L's
terrible.
left and bro, 4 buzzer beaters lost on, like the worst season that you could possibly have, right? So in my mind, I'm like never again will I let that happen. So that whole summer, I was spending time on my basketball game. Like I'm playing varsity next year.
You basketball, football?
Two sport, yeah.
Basketball, football.
So I'm spending time on my basketball game all summer long, right? You football, you're doing conditioning and stuff, but really I was like, man, I'm all in on basketball because I'm never gonna let that happen again. So as the football season in sophomore year, I'm now trying out for varsity in basketball. So as a sophomore, so make the team, right? I'm third, fourth off the bench, as a sophomore when the season started. I'm like 6'1". By the end of the season, by the time March hit, I was 6'4". From November to March, bro, like 3 inches.
Probably had that ostrich slaughter, that good knee.
Was
probably
man,
hurting.
Knees was, bruh, everything. But it went from third, fourth guy off the bench to first, second.
Okay.
Coming in, playing, right, and contributing minutes, and that's when things started to, okay, hey, you can compete. You're different. You can do some things that other guys who are older can't. And I started to see this as a sophomore, which gave me momentum going into my junior year. And so, my junior year, we started, and again, football up here, I'll go back when you're speaking about the culture, and I still can't figure this out. While there's great talent and ability in the Western New York area, in Section 6 football, and this, from Central New York to Buffalo here in Western New York, we still don't have the culture that you have in Western PA, in Pittsburgh, and in Ohio. And I can't for the life of me, these places that are only an hour or two away, I can't understand why we don't captivate it like it's done in those, like, you know what I mean? The Ohio football is different. Big 33, in PA is different. We don't have that here in Buffalo for some reason, right? There's a reason, Rob Gronkowski could have played football anywhere, but he left to go to Woody Hills.
Yeah, right here in Pittsburgh, right here, right down the street.
Exactly, right? And I know some, guys that I played with at University of Maine and in the pros that are from those areas. And high school football is just different than it is here in Buffalo. And I don't know if it's a New York State, interscholastic thing, whatever it may be. But we not quite to the level of Ohio and PA. While the talent is here, it's a little bit different.
The culture's not as developed. I mean, that's a city culture thing too. I mean, there's a lot of hot pockets in Pittsburgh where you get a lot of talent that comes from, and it's just, I mean, like you said, it's a ever-going cycle. It's whether it's in front office positions, if you go throughout the NFL, or just working within college sports, you'll see a lot of people that are from Pittsburgh because it's bred within the frame. There's a good book. It's about like the Aliquippa, the town of Aliquippa here in Pittsburgh, and
Aliquippa,
like the
PA.
steel mills, and just how everything kind of came about here, and just like the families that worked at the steel mill and their kids were growing up tough. Only activity was to play football. They're seeing the Stillers and the steel curtain and everything, and just like that whole culture just kind of bred people, and you seen kind of what it birthed from people that came and played here, and it's like
Not to cut you out, and see, that's where, Buffalo, I live 5 minutes from the steel plant, Lackawanna Steel Plant. I mean, this is blue collar, a very, very similar city, right? Steel plant, Ford, General Motors, like all those, General Mills, all those, it's a blue collar town that has that,
we might just have more athletes, dog.
Yeah,
Just got more. That might be it. Like just to call a spade a spade. Yeah, we might just have a few more athletes. We took Gronkowski off your hands. We'll take that. We'll take that.
There's more to that story, but we ain't gonna put Gronk out there. There's more to that story, but no, it really is, and I could tell you, it really is a difference in culture, in the football space, like I said, because to your point, you mentioned New York is basketball, and for a long time, I mean, that is what New York owned. While football athletes were coming out, we just weren't known for it. And when we think about the recruiting process, we play 8. How many regular seasons? How many games do you play in high school football? Did you play in high school football?
If you go to the championship, I think you play 12.
12. So
if you go to the championship, I think
what was
like
your regular
2 in the playoffs?
season?
So like 10, maybe.
It's like 10, right? Okay, so up here you had 8 regular season games. So 4 years, you got a whole nother season of playing football on us with 2 extra games per regular season, assuming you don't go to playoffs, which every team won't go to playoffs.
Man, Texas and Florida, Georgia, they play the spring ball. They're getting them snap. They're getting the snap count up.
To my point, right? So they got spring ball. They got longer seasons. By the time these scouts go to Florida, by the time they get to California, by the time they get to PA and Ohio, by the time they get to Buffalo, we done playing. You can't even see a live game. And then they don't want to travel because the snow is, and the weather is, they coming to see you if you're a bona fide prospect, but they're not carving out time to swing through Western New York, unless you're that guy.
I think you're pointing out a really critical point where it's like that compound interest of whether it's the extra games, the extra development and all that, whether it's in the South, Texas, PA, wherever the case may be, but it does come around a culture, right? Like in Georgia or Florida, some of the schools we used to recruit, they had a football period, right? Where like they were able to go to class and football. Like, that would never happen in PA when you're just talking about there's levels to it, right? Like,
yes.
And it's just a level of football isn't a one man show. We talked about earlier with like football operations having to control everything, but football is like, it's a corporation within a community that has external relations. And if those external relations aren't trying to help that football organization become great, it's a competitive disadvantage, to be completely honest with you. But I'm saying that to say, we talk about these different cultures and where people are coming, or even like the players that are being produced from Western PA or from Florida versus Buffalo, like that time period of just how important it is in that area in high school level or at those maturation points that you can get a scholarship, it starts to compound and it shows, right? Like we see where players are going to the NFL and things of that nature.
That's the importance of it, is where I find and where I bring it all up. Not that it's an excuse, I'll say, when I used to tease other players when, traveling around the country, like, man, you from Buffalo? Yeah, man, I know I wanted this thing more than you, bro. I was out there, I only had 6 months out of the year to get it in. You know what I'm saying? I had to go find a field to go run in the wintertime and to do this stuff and shovel the lines off, and so I would always joke about that, right? Finding a way to make it happen. But when you really think about it, man, I mean, it is I take it with, like there's a little something more that fortified you. That when you come up out of a place like it and you really want to get it again, it comes down to reps, and it comes down to that culture. Like, you can let it stop you if you want to, but at the end of the day, what do you really want to do? And what's your goal to make it out? And so, again, it's a great place to come through, man. And I think there's ripple effects to that culture when if with athletic success at the high school level brings funds and support and booster programs and different things. So you're not going to see kids start to leave and go to these private schools if you can compete at that level, right? If you can get that buy-in at that level. But if you don't pour in, you got to, you got to drink as you pour. So we got to make sure that we're consuming while we're putting out. and that'll start to expand. But again, it's there's a lot of great talent that comes out of this area, man. And it was I was fortunate to be one of them to get recruited and go on and play at Division I level and start my story.
I played with some good players, man. Shout out to Mark Rubin. Mark Rubin's another guy from Buffalo area.
So I'll tell you Mark Rubin's story. So, and this goes to show, right? Like, so as a high school kid, you know the guys in the area that are like the guys, right? They in the paper every week, this and that. And so I had a youth leader from our church that was a big football guy. He used to bring us around to training sessions and this and that. And he took us to go and watch this kid, Mark Rubin, play at Amherst High School. And so we go to this game, man. We get up there a little late, and they're on they're coming into the end zone. They're on like the 20-yard line, man. And I pull up to the fence, and I'm leaning on the fence. First snap of the game, this cat comes, catches a pass, 15, 20 yards, dives, stretches into the end zone, touches the pylon, touchdown right in front of me. I'm like, yo, this guy's the best player ever.
It doesn't take long,
because
man.
he was probably probably a senior when I was in freshman or 8th grade or whatever it was.
Oh, let me find out. Rue was a one-play guy. He was a 5-second clipper.
He was a heck of an athlete, and I think he still is from what I know. But yeah, there's some talent that come out of Buffalo, man, for sure.
Named most athletic trader on Wall Street for like 5 years, 6 years. I don't know if the streak's still going, so my bad, Rube. But shout out to Rube on that standpoint, man. So
who's that comparing against? Like, who's that though? Against some old washed up traders? Like,
hey, you said it, not me, man. There might be some young guys out there, hitting the early 6 a.m. F45 workout. You know what I mean? Getting it in, that good hip joint.
Mark don't even know me like that, man. I'm messing around, man.
It's all good, man. That Mark's good people. So what drew you to Maine? So your recruiting process is going, and before we get it, and even in that, as a trainer, with a dad as a trainer and not being super committed, how did that relationship go, and what drew you to Maine?
Yeah, so I'll say it like this. So guy I refer to as my pops, Damaris Johnson, spent 3 years with the Miami Dolphins. He's my best friend's dad.
Okay.
And he brought me up under his wing, man, took me in and raised me as his own. While I lived with my mother and whatnot, he lived right across town, 10 minutes from us.
Sure.
But Damaris, like I said, spent 3 years with Dolphins, 93 to 96, during those years, Marino years. And then 97 came here to Buffalo and didn't make the cut, but then decided to set up shop here as he got attached to the church here in Buffalo that he really, and became a pastor. And so that was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life, for him to end up getting cut from Miami, sent here, and then stay here. Because without him, I really don't know. I wouldn't have had any guidance in the athletic realm to the degree of somebody that had been there in my life. I wouldn't have seen further than what I knew, And so long and short of it, D became a trainer in the area. He came up under a very, very well-known trainer, John Gamble, down in Miami, one of the best, and was ahead of his time during the NFL strength and conditioning phases. And D recognized that nobody was doing that here in Buffalo, New York, and started to do that. And so, he became very good friends with Gordy Gronkowski, the Gronk's father. They started bringing his boys in and all the other. And so for me, it was more of it was hard work. I didn't know that yet.
Gotcha.
I didn't know what, like we said, there's levels. So now I know, okay, I can go here, be a little bit more athletic than all these little kids in the suburbs and running laps and doing this and that, but, being bigger, stronger than them. But I didn't know hard work to pro athlete level, right? And so when it came to, high school years, man, I was slow. I wasn't. So when it came to speed days and running pyramids, 4 3s, 2s, 1s, sprint, I'm crossing the line and guys already walking back. I'm like, bro.
I didn't know this. What's slow, bro? I guess I got
bro, slow. I'm a sophomore in high school. We started training, freshman year or whatever. But I'd come when I want to. Right.
Like, I'll be honest. If you were,
and it came down to, I had a relationship with Damaris, and obviously, his son was one of my closest friends, but, if I'm out of sight, out of mind, he ain't thinking about me. I'm good, right? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't have the money to pay him for it, so I felt guilty even showing up on the first place, even though he's like, Jay, man, you just come, man, right? But realistically, it was just the fact that I didn't want to get up at 8 a.m. and go run in the hot sun because everybody faster than me, right?
Yeah,
So if we keeping it a
everybody's
buck,
faster than me. That's
if
real.
we keeping it a buck, right? So, I might have been able to keep up with Robbie, at that time, but like, at the end of the day, that was in high school, you worried about other, you thinking about, even though there was pros there was college players, and realistically, nobody cared when you finished. They trying to get it in their own.
Dude, you
But
you
this
hit on
is,
something that was just like it's profound, like to an extent when you said you didn't want to go because you didn't want to get smoked, like when you're being
yeah.
and it's
I
like
mean, right?
no, 100%. But we see it a lot of times in high school recruiting where these guys don't run track, where it's like that's a legitimate way of getting faster, opening up opportunities to go to college, but you won't do it because a lot of times, whether some guys don't go to school because they don't have confidence in getting called reading out loud. Sometimes it's just a lack of knowing, right? Like
They not gonna raise their hand.
they're not gonna raise their hand. That's the same
Right.
guys what we see with recruiting with slow guys. Like, oh, he ain't trying to run. Like he's slow.
Right. So
that's a
this
real
was
thing.
my experience, but it came to that point where I said, man, forget that. I need to commit to this. And so I bought in, and I started to see the results, and I started to feel stronger. I started to move faster. I started to, I was only showing up on the agility days where we doing ladder drills and playing basketball.
Yeah, like, I could do this.
Yeah, I could do that. Right. Exactly. But I committed to that. And once I committed to that, once I set my mind, there was nobody outworking me. That was it.
Well, I got a question and follow up on that. When you're saying that you didn't want to go because it was like, all right, I had just a little insecurity about guys being faster. When you changed your mindset to being on the offensive, to be completely honest, like to be an offensive, like, yo, I'm locked in. Did you still have that feeling of like, man, I'm not trying to get out here and lose, or were you now just focused on getting better?
No, I was just focused on mastering the craft at that time. And
But you're saying,
honestly,
but the focus though, I'm saying like at one point because you identified what changed was your mindset. Like nothing else changed. Like you really didn't want to go because of your mindset, because you were saying, I don't really want to, because I bet you if you were the fastest person there, it would have been a little easier to go. I mean,
and
seriously.
again, it was a time where, as I told you, sophomore year to junior year, I went from 6'1" to 6'4", so my body changed too. So I'm now, I'm 190 pounds, 185 pounds as a junior, 6'4". That's a big kid compared to a lot of other guys that I was training with, right? And so I started to see that. I started to get a little bit of authority. I had a little bit of confidence. I made varsity, so there was momentum building in my favor at that time. And again, I'm taking all this perspective from a high school kid and all the things that are attached to performing and popularity and insecurities and all these different things that go on at that time.
No, I love that you said that, because that's what I'm really trying to drill into, because as you're trying to get better at your sport and do whatever you need to do, you're just talking about competing with your peers, right? Like you're not even thinking about, it doesn't sound like you're thinking about scholarships and stuff. You're trying to be the best Jeremy Kelley that you can be. And now I'm saying with that, you had the right focus. And I'm saying all those different things that you had to balance, it just brings me to some of the guys that we recruit now, when you can identify these things, but it's not as clear of a path as like, oh, this person's trying to be good. Cause like, you don't know, it might be the photo shoots on the visit. It might be the prospects of an NIL deal here. It might be the new stadium, like, or the clout of getting 100,000 followers in high school. Like, so when you start balancing all those things out with the natural things that go along with the football development process that you're talking about, which are already hard.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to bring into.
Clouded. And that's tough. That's tough for I don't envy college coaches, and I always say, man, I don't know that I've ever seen myself having a desire to go back into college athletics. Now I can't say that for sure, but I know now in the realm that it's in, it's like, man, you want to deal with that? That's the wild, wild west. That's just a swamp of trying, like you said, trying to decipher, man, what's the goal? What's the agenda here? Is this kid really love the game? Is he trying to get the bag? What's the aim? And I think a lot of kids, obviously, when you really break it down, they do want to play college football, right? The allure of stepping into a stadium, the allure of continuing in their education. But at the end of the day, there's also now, when you're talking about big dollars that they have access to, and they got coaches over here trying to pull them that have more than what they. I mean, that's a whole nother ballgame now. It's free agency. It's free agency with 18-year-old kids who are worried about, if a kid going to pick on their shoes when they go to school, So
that's real. And the thing is, the guys coming out of high school, like the talent difference is like this. So like the guys that are like special, that are good, like they're, but then like you said, like those mid-tier, that like those fringe guys that are continuing to work up, trying to figure out what it is, right? Like we know who the top 10 picks are going to be in the NFL draft, but it's like after that, like what are we trying to figure out? So how would you have dealt with the NIL stuff if you were at Maine right now?
So yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Maine wouldn't have had no NIL stuff. Man.
I mean, but NIL's individual, right? Look, like you model and stuff. You would have been in the scene. Like you could have been doing
That's an interesting thought.
Think about it. Like
that's an interesting thought. It really is. I would say. So the university, again, to go back, I know we divulged a little bit, but the reason and I ended up at Maine is because it was a great football program that had a history of putting guys in the NFL. I think at the time when I was coming out, 2006, Maine had the most AA players in the league at the time, or maybe drafted out in the league at the time, something like that. And I don't know if that's still the case now or whatnot, but we had some great players. And so to me, okay, that was number one, because my goal to play college football was to get to the NFL, period, point blank. They had a great education program from what I could tell at that time, or from what I knew. But it was blue collar, so when you take these trips, right, and you take your visits, and I had it narrowed down to, I had offers from virtually any 1AA school, but I had it narrowed down to University of New Hampshire, who was number one in the country at the time in FCS. Chip Kelly recruited me, and Youngstown State, who was another top 20 program at the time as well. But when I took the visit to Maine, it was like, man, it was tight, man. You had kids from Jersey, Long Island, New York, PA, Philly, and everybody was so close. Like wherever they went, they did together. Where I could tell other universities, it was like, oh, this group hangs out here, this group does this here. Like when you in Maine, there's only so much to do. You got the one club off campus, you get the house parties, we all move in a pod. It's very, Caucasian. There's not a lot of diversity. So if you black or biracial, whatever it is of another ethnicity on campus, you were an athlete for the most part. And so everyone was so tight. So, when I think about, again, small school, 11,000 undergrad, Orono, Maine, what type of NIL opportunities would be out there at the time? I think Twitter, I don't think I got a Twitter till my senior year. Facebook, you were excited just to get your school email so you could get a Facebook, so I don't know at Maine, what we would have had access to, but if I were to play now, I probably would leverage it pretty good. I think just being who I am, my personality, I think, but at the end of the day too, I got to keep it real. Like you also got to perform, and your brand is only as good as you can perform. And so for me, man, my game wasn't speaking for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I had a very unique college experience, and I left as a DN. I went in as a receiver, and I played both sides, and so I was just a special teams guy, a football player. So if I had any type of NIL deal, it would have been because of a wink and a smile, man. It wasn't because I had all these yards on the field.
But that's interesting when you say that, because there's a level of NIL being that authentically curated brand, right? Like as long as it's real and it resonates with a sector of people, like you can monetize it. Like we're talking about being a model or being 6'6" in Maine, doing these different things. It's like you can craft a brand. Like Kawhi Leonard has a brand, Pat McAfee has a brand, or like Terrell Owens has a brand, and like I'm trying to think of somebody off the top. Stephen A has a brand, but like the thing that lets them or Marshawn Lynch, like the thing that has a stick is a level of authenticity is attached to it, right? Like, and obviously,
so I'm selling myself short. Maybe I'm selling myself short.
That's all I'm saying is, man, like if you end up still making it to the NFL, and we'll get into that a little bit.
You're right.
here because you had a pretty interesting journey to the NFL. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, so, coming out of college, I could tell you, man, it was the numbers, I think, is 13 catches, 184 yards, 1 touchdown. That's not a game. That's career, right? Something like that. That's it. 5 years. So when you think about scouts weren't necessarily knocking on our coach's door saying, "Hey, can we talk to you about Jeremy Kelley?" But when you talk about, going from this kid who is worried about coming in last on sprints to a kid who is, if you had asked me at any point during my college career if I was going to play in the NFL, I would have told you yes, undoubtedly. Like I had that level of confidence in who I was or what I was capable of, and
Where did that confidence come from? Because you weren't, like
work.
you said, you weren't a big recruit. You said you didn't put in the time at one point.
Work, because I did when I did put in that time, and I started and I got to the next level, even in college. I knew what I was capable of, and I still believed in my ability. And I knew that I was still an outlier, just given my size and my intangibles, and I knew that if I was, I could outwork other guys. Again, I had spent time being in the city of Buffalo, like I had been around pros, so I'd seen what it took at that level. I had a pro that was, essentially a father to me. So when it came down to somebody like him saying, "Hey Jay, we're gonna switch you from quarterback to wideout, man. You got what it takes to play at the next level." That's all I needed to hear, bro. Somebody told me I could. That was it. And then I put the work on top of that. It was over. I knew what I was gonna do.